Good evening, everyone. Being that tonight is the 8th night of Hanukkah, I'd like tonight's Drasha to be a Hanukkah theme. A friend of mine who was involved in public speaking one time told me that when I speak, I should never read off of something, like read to the audience. If I remember correctly, he said it bores them. And, I trust this friend's advice very much. To be honest, I don't always listen to it. And if my friend is listening, shouldn't be a surprise to him. But I do treasure his advice. But like I say, I don't always listen to it. And there are times that I do read to the audience, because sometimes I feel that the way that something has been written will be better expressed if I read it. And tonight, that's what's going to happen. A big part of tonight's sermon is going to be read off. I'm going to be reading an article. And it's very interesting because I have this article. This article I'm about to read to you from Rabbi Meir Schiller, who lives in Muncie. He teaches in the Yeshiva University High School for Boys. He's a teacher also in Stern College, I believe. And he wrote an article in 1998, which was featured in Israel's Viewpoint magazine, 1998. And this is an article that I clipped and saved from the many things that I have saved, from the too many things that I have saved, and I'd always gotten to. And this article was something that more than once I took a look at, and I held on to it for a long time. And this year I read it again, and it really resonated with me. I don't know why this year more than any other year, but it really resonated. I found it fascinating, and I really would like to share it with you. And the article is entitled "The Maccabees for Today." This is again by Rabbi Meir Schiller, and it appeared in the Viewpoint magazine, 1998. 1998. I was only a year into my rabbinate here. My daughter was even less than 1 year old. And this is the article, "The Maccabees for Today." So Rabbi Schiller begins, "The Maccabees fought and, in large numbers, died to preserve our faith in its undiluted purity. They battled against an oppressive paganism which sought to deny the divine election of Jewry, to substitute the amoral hedonism of Greece for the monotheistic morality of Torah. The war they waged was, of course, physical, but its source was spiritual. It was from the deep and passionate wellsprings of their emunah, faith, that strength was derived to challenge and ultimately defeat numerically superior forces." That's the introduction. In order for the Maccabees to exist today, with the courage of their convictions intact, they would have to nurture their spiritual life via attachment to God as he is to be found in his Torah and the practice of commandments. This is what it takes to be a Maccabee. Again, they would have to nurture their spiritual life via attachment to God as he is to be found in his Torah and the practice of commandments. This nurturing would yield the Maccabean love of God and conviction that the only questions really worth answering in our lives are those which concern the state of our souls and loyalty to God. Everything else, including, if need be, physical survival, is merely background scenery. And as the original Maccabees were not deterred by the threat of social opprobrium, military might, and possible death, so too would our hypothetical contemporary warriors of the Lord exhibit a pious fearlessness. So that's the makeup of the Maccabee. It starts with nurturing the spiritual life through an attachment to Hashem from Torah and mitzvahs. But that's going to create a unbelievable conviction to a life of Torah, to a life of spirituality. a life of spirituality that will not deter them or scare them from being able to fight the battle for God. Of course, today there are other powers in society which are as capable of destroying the good as was Greek coercion and licentiousness. Namely, I hope I read that right. Namely, capital and media. Doubtless, contemporary Maccabee would have to ignore and occasionally bravely confront these forces as well. So this is the setup. You've got the Maccabee who now has a conviction to God that the only question really worth answering in our lives are those which concern the state of our souls and loyalty to him. And the battle and the contemporary Greece would be other powers in society that destroy the good, which would be in our situations, capital and media. And so the question emerges, with whom and how would a Maccabee today cross swords? Who's the enemy? Essentially, our warrior would oppose those people and social forces who seek to weaken or destroy faith in God and his laws. He would yearn to see the final defeat of secularism and heterodoxy in all their incarnations. Indeed, this defeat will, in fact, be the final outcome of the war of Gog and Magog at the end of days. In the meantime, the Maccabean goal would be to reverse the 200-year-old desacralization of reality, parentheses, with its roots in the Reform/Enlightenment and medieval nominalism, despite no guarantee of pre-Messianic final victory. So the battle is secularism. The battle is with, as he said before, capital and media. Things that come across as perhaps even maybe innocent or not clearly seeming to be aimed at desanctifying life, but do that automatically and very possibly and very often, if not outright, definitely it's definitely there in the back of their minds that we're here to battle, that they are there to battle godliness, religion. How is the struggle to be joined? How do we fight this battle? First, we must make God's service the focus of our existence. The passionate prayer, study. Again, first, we must make God's service the focus of our existence via passionate prayer, study, and mitzvah practice. This avoda, this service, will allow an awareness of the Creator's proximity to permeate the depth of our souls, thus fortifying us for the Maccabean war against evil. I think that's a beautiful line. This avoda will allow an awareness of the Creator's proximity to permeate the depths of our souls, thus fortifying us for the Maccabean war against evil. The passionate prayer and study of Torah and mitzvah practice will allow our emunah, our faith in Hashem, to be strong. Because all these things, again, in a passionate form, in a real form, in a serious form, in a form of emotion, of connection, that allows the awareness of Hashem's proximity, the awareness of Hashem's proximity to our lives, to permeate the depths of our souls. And what does that do? It fortifies us for the Maccabean war against evil. That's what he meant before when he said it was from the deep and passionate wellsprings of their own emunah belief that strength was derived to challenge and ultimately defeat numerically superior forces. If you know that God is there, then you have the strength, you have the faith, you have the trust in Hashem to do what you have to do. One cannot fight against overwhelming odds without a certain impractical devotion. From Samson Raphael Hirsch From Shraga Feivel Mendlowitz, the sense that the Lord is with me, I will fear no evil, has formed the core of those later day Maccabees who rescued so many from the fires of godlessness. Reb Samson Mayfield Hirsch was a famous rabbi of German Jewry. I think it was he lived at the end of the 1800s, and he steered German Jewry away from the Reform movement to a life of dedication to Torah and mitzvahs in its fullest. Rav Shai Weigel Mendlowitz was a builder of Torah here in the United States. And the truth is, there are so many stories, including Rabbi Soloveitchik here in Boston, who, when they wanted to build start a Hebrew day school, they wanted to create formal Torah education. They were met with derision. They were met with antagonism. They were definitely met with doubters who thought they were crazy for trying. In the United, whoever thought of having a yeshiva, of having a formal Jewish education? It was considered impossible. But many people in many communities fought back against that apathy and were the Maccabees of their days to save so many lives from the fires of godlessness, save so many neshamas, and neshamas that had beautiful Jewish families that fill our communities to this day. Rabbi Yezer Shem Kahaneman was known as the Panevėžio Rav. He was the Rav of Panevėžio, Lithuania. And he went to Eretz Yisrael. And there, after the war, he built many Torah institutions. The most famous one being the yeshiva, the Panevėžio Yeshiva in Bnei Brak in Israel. And the story goes that he was telling someone about his idea to build a yeshiva. And the person said to him, "Rabbi, you're dreaming." Rabbi Khan responded, "I'm dreaming, but I'm not sleeping." You need to be a dreamer. But to be a dreamer means that you have that, as Rabbi Schiller calls, the impractical devotion that comes from the awareness of Hashem's proximity that permeates one's essence. Okay, so that's the first thing. The first way to deal with the struggle is, again, to make God's service the focus of our existence. And second, we must proclaim the truth of Torah clearly to all Jews. This may be done with whatever combination of firmness and love we find effective. The real enemy within is our own indifference to the spiritual plight of the vast majority of Klal Yisrael, long since captured by the forces of secularism and heresy. The battle is to persuade and inspire them back to their Creator's warm embrace. And that is done in a number of ways. But it means teaching the truth and the beauty of Torah to whether they be people who are estranged from Judaism, or whether it means to educate the next generation with a deep love and affection for Torah mitzvahs. Then he continues, Greek confusion. The ancient Greeks did not demand that we totally surrender Jewish practice. They asked that we simply combine it with paganism. Only isolated mitzvahs were to be abandoned. Temple sacrifices went on, provided they were accompanied by idolatry. So again, the Greeks were trying to, they wanted us to adopt Greek culture and Greek religion and Greek way of life. But they didn't necessarily say we have to stop being Jewish. We could be both. And that was the confusion. That was the darkness of Greece that the miracle of the menorah shone light through. And Rabbi Shiller continues, this is precisely the crossroads we face today. The freedom offered by leftist democracies allows us to declare ourselves Jews. Yet their vast mind control apparatus of education, media, and the courts demand that we submit in mind and at times indeed to the regimen of disrespect and perversion, to pop emptiness digested by faithless masses of consumers, all manifestations of philosophy at war with faith and dignity. To this vast force, whose dark embrace surrounds us, our Maccabean response is unconditional. It is never submit and never surrender. Part of the soft decadence which dominates society is an endless succession of cliches concerning pluralism, tolerance, and democracy. These terms represent legitimate philosophical strands for those who maintain that we can never know the truth about ultimate matters. If truth be inaccessible, then no belief is any better than any other, and all views have equal claims, hence pluralism and tolerance. Further, if there is no truth, then the will of the majority is the only means to govern society. No objective standards may take precedence over the latest poll or election result. For a Torah Jew to embrace any of the above is illogical and clear evidence that the contradictions which existed in the minds of the classical Hellenists continue to plague us to this day. A contemporary Maccabee would fearlessly teach and, if need be, do battle to maintain the clarity of our faith, the absolute truth of Torah, and a sense of empathy, love, and concern, in parentheses, not tolerance, for those smitten by the errors of a godless age. It's very interesting, this word that he said. We have empathy, love, and concern, not tolerance. Not tolerance doesn't mean I can't tolerate you. I can't tolerate you. No, I can tolerate you. I just can't tolerate I can't tolerate that kind of belief. I can't tolerate the kind of belief that leads us to what he calls the errors. I can't tolerate a belief that leads us away from a life of Torah. I can't tolerate that belief. Doesn't mean I can't tolerate the person, because on the contrary, person, or that person believes, if that belief is against Torah belief, then I can't tolerate that belief. I can tolerate the person, though, because I have love and concern for that person. And therefore, this is what Rabbi Schiller is saying, is what the contemporary Maccabee has to do battle with. And it's really very interesting how he really puts things into perspective of what is it that we face nowadays. You know, we face an onslaught of media. We face an onslaught that comes from the internet that creates many problems for our proper observance. It creates a lot of confusion. Everything in our society creates confusion. That was the power of Greece. To create this confusion of thinking that I can be Jewish and I can do all these things. The present-day Maccabee has to be ready to stand up and to teach people the truth of Torah. To first focus themselves, make sure, as he said, that through passionate prayer and study and mitzvah observance, to make the focus of our existence Hashem's service. That is how the Maccabee has to create the strength within himself or herself. And then be ready to do battle. Battle can mean you can do battle just by smiling at someone, teaching someone, being friendly with someone, and bringing them closer to Hashem, bringing them closer to Torah. But to create a confusion in which we somehow or another can convince ourselves that we can be Jews and deal with ways of life that are godless is impossible. It's a contradiction. The two things are a contradiction. And Rabbi Schiller concludes, may we be worthy that the holiness of Hanukkah inspire us to join the contemporary Maccabean cause. So I think this is really a very, very interesting article and really puts things into perspective for ourselves. how important it is for us to, as he says, bring a passionate devotion into our own lives, so that the focus of our lives is service of Hashem, and that Hashem's proximity permeates our essence. Because it's from that we find, from that amunah, from that faith and that trust in Hashem, we find the strength to do the battle, to not be afraid, to go out and to spread the light of Torah. With the way Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch sums up what Hanukkah is about. And again, my point tonight is to talk about Hanukkah in a way that we here, as Hanukkah ends, take the message and the spirit of Hanukkah with us throughout the rest of the year. Each year when the Hanukkah season recurs, lights are kindled in every home of Israel and by every son of Israel. And the events of those days are celebrated and worded in song, paying homage to God. Thus, the darkened courses of Israel are lit up by this message. The spiritual light of Israel will never be dimmed. And even if round about you everything becomes defiled by the oppression of the time, so long as the light remains pure within the confines of only one house or within the breast of only one man, which was Matisyahu in the times of Hanukkah, live on joyfully amid all the wanton aberration, and die joyfully under the frenzy of a madman, for the spiritual life of Israel is saved. God watches over it, and even by the light of one man, he rekindles it anew. And that one man or that one woman can be any one of us in a number of different forms. We can be the one that makes sure the light of Judaism continues to burn in the hearts of another fellow Jew, a few fellow Jews, many fellow Jews, whatever it may be. Hanukkah is a celebration that Hashem will never allow the light of Israel to be dimmed. Wishing you a happy Hanukkah, Shabbat Shalom, and all the best.